I glared at the woman who had helped my wife get off her buddy.
What's wrong with you, Dee? I thought you were our friend. We agreed on what it meant if a spouse cheated. But now this? Just because he's famous? You think you'll get over it quickly?
I always thought you were a bit dumb, but I underestimated you. Do me a favor. Never talk to me again. Ever. If I'm drowning and you see me, just keep walking. I'd rather die. Get away from me. She looked dazed. I'd never spoken to anyone in our circle like that before. I turned to leave, but was stopped by a huge bouncer. Is the night over already? Get out of my way. He smirked. Drunk and belligerent. For everyone's sake, go back to your table and have some drinks. I'll make sure they're on the house. I glared at him until he got nervous. How much is he paying you to intervene? Hopefully a lot, because if you don't move right now, you'll need every penny. His eyes widened. You can't scare me. I'll wipe the floor with you without breaking a sweat. Maybe. But know this, I don't fight fair, and I don't forgive. If you punch me, finish the job because I'll come after you. You'll have to watch your back forever. Maybe I'll hire someone to make sure your career as a bouncer is over. If I can't get to you, I'll go after your family. So you have a choice. Move. He didn't notice as he stepped back. It was funny, really, since he was at least 6'5" and 300 pounds. I was 5'11" and 180, and he clearly had a better muscle-to-fat ratio than I did. But I had something he didn't. Pure, unadulterated nuclear rage. It couldn't be beaten. I was almost to the door when someone grabbed my arm. I clutched the hand and spun around, dragging the person with me. When I realized it was Janie, I let her go. I was about to walk away when she grabbed my leg. Don't do this. Think about your kids. I looked at her with all the contempt I could muster. You mean like she did when she slipped out the back door with that idiot? As for family, I don't have one anymore. I'll always be good to my kids, unlike that ex-wife of mine. Maybe I'll file for custody in the divorce. Her actions today prove she's an unfit mother. She let go and covered her mouth with her hand. I made it to the elevator before another shout rang out. Bob, think about this. Are you really going to throw away 10 years because of one night? I looked at my former friend and his gang. I didn't throw away anything. She did. Look me in the eye and tell me you think what she did was acceptable. Every one of you. Look at me. Tell me you don't think what she did was so bad and that if your wife had done that, everything would have been fine. Oops, sorry, Harry. That ship has already sailed. You know she's seeing him again, don't you? Harry glanced at Erica, who hung her head and walked back to the clubhouse. The others were yelling at each other, so I slipped into the elevator. Packing didn't take long. I left Linda's stuff behind. If she wanted it, she could come get it. 30 minutes later, I was discharged and reached the parking lot when I heard them. My friends were waiting for me, arguing, with Eric blocking my car door. Move before I start the car, or you'll be sprawled across the lot. Before he could say more, I punched him in the gut. None of them were fighters, but I was. As a teenager, I had a temper and got into fights, even got in trouble with the law. Counseling helped me control my anger, but right now, I didn't care. I unlocked my car, shifted into gear, and screeched forward, scattering them like quail. I had no idea where I was going or what I'd do. She'd been gone almost an hour, likely with him. I wanted to find them and leave them in a pool of blood, but that was unlikely. He was the top tight end for the local pro football team, key to their championship hopes, with a new $106 million contract. His house would be locked up tighter than Fort Knox. I wasn't a martial arts expert or a former Navy SEAL. I was just a guy in decent shape with no access to wealth or influential friends. As I sat at a stoplight, an idea hit me. If I went forward, there was no turning back. I stopped in front of a late-night diner with free Wi-Fi. I thought about my plan. Social media was the way to get revenge. Linda had accounts on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and TikTok. I wasn't tech-savvy, but my niece was. She had just turned 18 and had scholarship offers from Ivy League and technical colleges. I called her, and she was surprised to hear from me so late. When I offered her $500 to help me, she was very interested. Before I could tell her where I was, she texted, "Got it, Unc. We'll be there in 7 minutes." I wondered who "we" was, but as long as she was coming, I didn't care. I went inside the diner and asked the waitress for a quiet booth away from people. Then I asked, "You close at midnight, right?" She nodded. "How many customers do you expect after closing, and how much would a good tip be? 2 of my friends are coming soon, and I'd like the place to stay as crowded as possible. Tell the owner I'll cover any lost profits if we can work here for an hour or two. Plus $200 for you if you keep the sodas and coffee coming." She grinned. It's the end of February, and it's freezing outside. Anyone who came in is either staying put or already home. I'll close now. I own the place. Give me $403, $200 for me, $200 for the cook, and a tip. Need anything before I send him home?" Just then, my niece walked in with a guy. She looked much different, more put together. I quickly apologized. "Sorry, guys. If I'd known you had plans, I wouldn't have asked. My request might seem crazy, but hear me out. Let me explain what happened." When I finished, they were shocked. Nanette hissed indignantly. "So your wife, my aunt, ditched you at a club to spend the night with some superstar and your friends covered for her? What kind of people are these?" "They're actually her friends from high school and college. She was thrilled when my company moved us here. She couldn't wait to leave Chicago. I thought we shared the same values, but I was wrong. We're no longer friends. Let me tell you what I want to do, and you can tell me how bad an idea it is and what trouble I'll get into." I explained my plan, and Eric and Nanette burst into laughter. When they calmed down, Nanette asked Eric to get the black box from the car. It turned out to be an unregistered laptop she had modified.
"No one will be able to trace it. I'll call stations worldwide without being on hold for more than half a second. I've been perfecting this since I was 13 and kept it secret until I could patent it. That's why all these schools are chasing me, and the military offered a lucrative deal to skip college and work for them." Nanette asked questions while setting everything up. "Got it," she exclaimed, showing me my wife's Facebook screen. "I'm in. Let the chaos begin." They scrolled through her posts, asking about different people, while Nanette took notes. When a picture of her best friend with a strange coordinator popped up, I almost lost it. I gave Nanette the names of my so-called friends who were with us. She had all their accounts up in minutes. Nanette grinned at me. "Ready to see what Dee's hiding?" "Make it as disgusting as possible." Eric was quiet for a moment. "Are you sure about this? Once we start, there's no turning back. You're throwing a grenade into your marriage." "I'm sure. Ever since this started, it's all I think about. There's no way I could live with her again." She threw the first grenade. "I'm going to DEFCON 4 and considering nuclear options. Get started." Nanette began typing, pretending to be my wife. "Exciting update. I have officially joined the CCC, the Celebrity Club. I'm with Mark, who has a really tight end and knows how to ram it in. So proud he picked me. Thanks to my girlfriend for covering with my husband while I slipped away. I've done the same for her before. Remember the girls' weekend in Atlantic City? Dee, you scored with a hockey player who knows how to score. Ha. Nanette added a bunch of smiley faces, then continued. "Right now, we're resting at halftime. We'll start the second half soon. Hopefully it will go into overtime." She then forged messages from the women at the club, giving high fives and saying they couldn't wait for their turn with the stud. Janie chastised her husband for being a pushover. "He doesn't have to be rich, just strung out and last more than 5 minutes." Nanette posted pictures of the guy and Linda. Despite it being almost midnight, notifications were lighting up as people saw the posts. Phones were probably ringing in her social circle. Nanette then lit up Instagram, Twitter, and TikTok. I wasn't worried about my wife getting calls. She likely had her phone off and wouldn't be interrupted. Comments started pouring in. "Is this a joke? I bet your husband doesn't think it's funny. What's going on with you?" This was from her favorite aunt. I wondered why she was still awake. Nanette replied, "This is no joke. I saw an opportunity and took it. How many can say they've slept with someone famous? If you don't believe me, come to his house tomorrow at 10 o'clock. 130 Wyndham Circle. It's a mansion. Maybe you'll see my walk of shame. Or fame." Another person joined in. I didn't know her, but she had over 700 friends spreading the rumor. "Really? You're proud of leaving your husband? Do you think your marriage will survive this? I love my husband. He'll get through this. There might be some hardship, but I'll spoil him, and he'll forgive me. It's just one night, and I'll never repeat it." "Really? Are you drunk? Did you ever think you'd do it the first time? You're delusional. I'm done with you as a friend. Don't contact me. I hope you still think it was worth it in the light of day. It might be all you have left." I recognized the name. It was her boss's wife. That gave me another idea, and Nanette posted everything on the company page. She'll have some interesting conversations on Monday. Another person replied, "It's all nonsense, isn't it? If you think it's funny, you're wrong. Every word is true. We're going to be fine. I have faith in my husband." How did he ever believe in you? The only explanation is you were hit by a Martian horary. I've seen some stupid decisions, but this tops them all. It's almost Darwin Award level, usually ending in pass away. Maybe the pass away of your marriage will vindicate you. I'm with Rosalind. I'm done with you. Don't try to reply because you'll be blocked. God help you. This was from her first cousin.
She lived in another state, and I wondered how long it would take for the extended family to find out. Nanette looked sad. She'd always liked Linda.
You're destroying her, ripping the foundations of her life out from under her feet. Are you sure you don't want to stop?
Not yet. I've got a few more things to do, and then I'm done with her. Literally. We sent messages to the team's website, the NFL office, its charities, the mayor, the city council, and everyone we could think of. Nanette flooded Instagram and Twitter. Posts and comments poured in quickly. Then she found his accounts and did the same. He was seen as a model athlete involved in the community, with 2 charities and constant volunteer work. The team and the league loved him. It was time to bring some pain. Eric found the name and number of a sports writer who disliked the guy. He was annoyed about being woken up, but calmed down when I told him what I had. Eric used a voice scrambler, making me sound like a woman.
Stop whining. I'm giving you a story. Mark is with a married woman right now. She was with her husband when Mark pulled her out of the club tonight.
Talk to the bouncer if you don't believe me. Her name is Linda Hamilton. She's been married for 10 years and has 2 small kids. So much for the NFL poster boy, huh? We later found out the sports writer was furious because Mark had pulled the same stunt on him. He and his wife had just reconciled after a separation. It was the off-season, and there wasn't much going on in local sports, making the story more appealing. We also sent letters to local TV stations and newspapers. I doubted anything would come of it, but Mark was well-known and popular, and the media would be interested. By 6 in the morning, 2 vans, 1 reporter, and paparazzi were at his gated neighborhood. By 8, someone from the team or central office was pounding on his door. He opened it in his robe, with cameras zooming in. Behind him, Linda, also in a robe, was clearly visible. The cameras clicked frantically. His eyes widened at the sight of the reporters, and he slammed the door shut. The man must have told him the whole story because Linda immediately checked her Facebook page. The house was solid, but her scream could be heard even outside the gate. She tried to close her account, but found it locked. Nanette later counted over 3,000 comments on all media platforms in the first 6 hours. Linda had never been so popular. At 10 o'clock, they finally left the house. Linda had her head covered, but everyone recognized her. I was surprised by the media attention, but he was famous, and it was a slow news weekend. She got into an unknown man's car, and he drove around the house, exiting the driveway. This wasn't their first encounter with paparazzi, who had spotted this entrance too and got a clear shot of Linda as they passed by. The man drove her home, and I wondered what she thought when she was alone. I picked up the kids from the babysitter and took them to my parents' house. I wasn't surprised to see her parents there because we were all close. Both mothers were Facebook friends, so they knew everything. But she wasn't alone. 4 cars were stalking her house, and now they had her address. She got out of the car and ran to the front door as questions rained down on her. Was she his girlfriend now? Had she left her husband for him? Did her husband approve? These questions, particularly the last one, were asked frequently over the next few weeks when I talked to her family. It was stressful. We know what she did. Everyone in the southern half of the country knows. We also know it wasn't her on Facebook. Judging by her actions, she's not that smart. But she was never suicidal. How could you do that to her? Ask her the same question and get back to me. I had no intention of keeping the kids from her, but I wanted a few days for things to settle down. I stayed at a room we rented for our affair. The receptionist looked at me strangely, but gave me a room for 3 days. It was funny to run into former friends checking out as I headed to my room, running on adrenaline and rage after being awake for 30 hours. Dee rushed over. "You idiot! Do you realize how much you hurt Linda? It was all for nothing. Just a fantasy she wanted to fulfill. She would have been the same when she got home. No, she was damaged. And when something is damaged, I have 2 choices. Fix it or get rid of it. Linda has damaged our marriage beyond repair, and it's not worth the emotional cost to fix it. I never slept with that hockey player. So, you admit you dated him. You had dinner and went to the dance. Even if you didn't sleep with him, it was a chance to fulfill a fantasy, wasn't it? Hubby will be upset if you tell him. But you can get him to forgive you, can't you?" Her group backed away, but at the mention of the hockey player, her husband stepped forward. "I'm going to kick your..." I told the bouncer, "I don't fight fair, I fight to win." I punched him at the hip. As he squirmed in pain, I looked at the cameras in the hall. "It's all on tape, dude. Your attempt to attack me in my defense. Remember that as a life lesson. And focus on what you're going to do with your wife." I looked at my former friends. "Remember this for the rest of your lives.
I'll probably get divorced soon, but I bet I'm not the only one. Think about it and make a decision. I'd wish you luck, but I hope your lives blow up as much as you helped blow up mine." Despite requests and demands, I never slept in my old house again. Linda was very angry at first, not understanding my reaction. She thought it wasn't a big deal. She may have dumped me in the worst way and then spent the night with a stranger, but that was in the past. It was time to move on. After all, he was famous. She wanted to get back to normal. Truth is, she had a thing for him since our days in Chicago when he played there. We used to watch the Bears together, and she even bought a charity poster of him. It must have been a dream come true when he asked her to dance. When she realized I wasn't coming back, she got cowy. She became furious when served with divorce papers citing infidelity. Linda resorted to every threat, but I persisted. She begged for mercy, surprised I had none. She barely kept her job. It was a close call. And it took a while before her boss even acknowledged her. We were ordinary people, but her fling changed that. The paparazzi got to the bouncer, who spilled everything for money. There were at least 3 other incidents at that club. Mark liked to party a lot. I bet he regretted not signing with another team when he left Chicago. The Panthers are in North Carolina, an alienation of affection state. He should have chosen a home outside the state line. My lawyer advised me to wait until the divorce was finalized before going after him. But he, his team, and the NFL went into defense mode. One evening, a man with a briefcase knocked on my new apartment door. "Sir, I'd like to talk." "Go away." I slammed the door and locked it. He pounded so hard I called the police, who made him leave. He shook his fist at my security camera before leaving. Then the new team owner called me. I cut him off before he could start. "Only 4 people have my number. How did you get it?" "Does it really matter?" "Yes." I hung up, went to the phone store, and got a new number. This went on for 8 days until I got another call. "Sir, I represent a children's charity. May I have a moment?" "I already support 3 charities and can't fund another. Have a good day." "Wait, I'm not asking for a donation. I'm offering you money." "Why?" "The founder and main donor is Mark Lee." I hung up and blocked the number. They found my new email and sent long messages about how my actions hurt the charity and caused donations to drop. I called them. "How is this my fault?" "Your accusations against Mark have tarnished his reputation and caused him unnecessary suffering. If you publicly forgive him and your wife, it would reduce the public interest in this case. Let me be clear. This man seduced my wife in front of me and about 50 witnesses, and his thug tried to stop me. She stayed the night with him, and while she won't admit to having lovemaking, we all know it happened. Here's a deal. Have him publicly admit he had lovemaking with my wife knowing she was married, and I'll consider it. That wouldn't be in anyone's best interest. Can't we persuade you to let it go?" "That problem isn't going away. It's just getting worse. If he donates all his money to create time travel, then we'll talk. Until then, if he thinks things are bad now, wait a few days and never contact me again." "What are you—" I complained to Eric and Nanette about not being able to slam down my cell phone, which gave them an idea. They created an app that made an old-fashioned phone slam sound when you hung up. They patented it and charged $1 per download, putting me on the paperwork saying it was my idea. 33 cents per download added up to serious money after 50,000 downloads in 2 months. I used the money to buy a real house instead of living in an apartment, and the kids were happy about it. It broke my heart to leave them, but every time I saw her, I wished I had eliminated her on the spot. She was deluded, thinking I'd just accept what she did and move on. Her favorite refrain was, "It was one night." Yes, it was one night too many. Tell me the truth. You knew I'd never let it happen if I found out, which is why you got your promiscuous girlfriends to help you sneak off with your man's strumpet like a thief in the night. That's exactly what you were, a thief. You stole our future, Linda. You and your idiot are to blame. You think he's in pain? No, he's probably laughing. He doesn't care that he ruined a family. She was shocked. I almost never raised my voice, especially not in front of the kids. I don't think I ever did it to her either. Maybe that was the problem. She thought I was weak and wouldn't leave her. The kids didn't handle it well. I sent them to therapy, and it started to help. The therapist didn't belittle their mother, but explained that she made a serious mistake and was now facing the consequences. She invited us to separate sessions, and since I was paying, I got summaries. Linda still denies her guilt and tells the children it wasn't bad enough to justify a divorce. Your daughter asked what she did, and Linda said it was an adult matter she'd understand in a few years. Your son, only 4, memorizes what he hears in the media. She never answered his questions directly.
Just said she made a terrible mistake and is trying to fix it. He doesn't believe her and feels a lot of animosity towards her. In the therapy session, I answered the kids' questions as honestly as I could. Yes, I'm divorcing your mother because of what you've heard. She broke a promise and a commitment. You know that when you promise something, you have to keep it. When you become an adult, promises are more serious. She made these promises in front of 200 people, both legally and spiritually. She knew what would happen if she broke them, but she did it anyway. I still love your mother, but I don't trust her anymore. Trust is key. If I promised to pick you up from school every Wednesday and did so for a year but then missed one because I wanted to do something else, how many times would you wait before you realized you couldn't trust me? Would you believe me if I said it wouldn't happen again? I think I got through to them a little and followed the therapist's advice by not saying anything bad about their mother. I told them that while our relationship had changed, we both loved them very much. I only talked about their mother if they brought her up. Linda, on the other hand, did the opposite. She told the kids that she made a mistake, but it wasn't bad enough to end the marriage. She said I was just being stubborn and things would work out. The therapist was furious and told her, "How could you do this to your children? Your husband shows no interest in reconciling. He talked to the kids about divorce, and they understand from their classmates' experiences. They know your relationship is over. You refuse to accept you did anything wrong enough to justify a divorce. I recommend you seek counseling with a married couple. It probably won't help reconcile, but it might help you accept reality and move on. I won't be seeing you again. Thank you for attending." Linda wasn't affected except for the counseling suggestion. Her counselor was good, and the judge ordered 8 sessions. The therapist could stop after 4 sessions if there was no progress or add more sessions if there was. My lawyer tried to gag me, but I stood up and asked the judge to speak. He nodded, warning me to be polite. "Your Honor, I need to be clear. I have no interest in a relationship with my wife other than as co-parents. I will attend the sessions, but refuse to attend more than 8. That should be enough. I'm serious. You can jail or fine me if I refuse, but this divorce is getting media attention, and you don't want it to become a mess. I'm happy to talk to the press. Also, I want her lover to attend 1 session and explain why he thinks sleeping with married women is acceptable and why it shouldn't affect my marriage. Thank you, sir." My lawyer looked at me like I had grown 2 heads, and the judge seemed unsure whether to laugh or reprimand me. Linda looked like she was about to be sick, and her lawyer seemed desperate to find something to object to. Finally, the judge banged the gavel twice. "I can't send him to marriage counseling if it's not his marriage. I'll draft a letter requesting consideration, but don't hold out much hope. Your attorney might say it's legal to require him to appear in court, but that's up to you. Submit a list of therapists, or get one from the court, and I want sessions to start in 2 weeks, twice a week, so it will be over sooner. If anyone misses a session, I won't threaten jail, but I will declare the session valid and not allow rescheduling. Ordered. Bailiff, proceed to the next case." Linda was not happy. She confronted me at the car, looking determined. "This has to stop. Please, this isn't what I wanted." I knew talking without our lawyers was a bad idea, but curiosity got the best of me. "What did you think would happen?" "I thought you'd be angry, but love me enough to get over it. It was one night. All the years we've been together, our family, our kids, it wasn't worth throwing away for one night. It wasn't just one night. It was every night for the rest of our lives. What you did was cold, calculated, and utterly disrespectful. You left me humiliated in front of our friends. Some of them even helped you sneak away. Before that night, I would have bet my life that you loved me and our children. Not anymore. We're done, and no amount of counseling will fix that. I'll see you at the first session." "Wait, I need a favor." "What favor?" "It's about Mark. Could you cut him some slack? It's affecting his charity work. Think of the children." "You mean like you and him thought about ours that night? I don't care about his charities, and soon his charity will be the least of his problems." "Will you tell me how you know that?" She looked guilty. "He called me." "He did? How did he get your number?" Her face reddened. "You gave it to him that night, didn't you? In case he wanted to repeat the performance." "I didn't. I don't know why I gave it to him. I just did. I should have known you wouldn't help." I laughed and got in the car, amazed at how foolish she'd become. During all this, I faced constant pressure to be reasonable. The league, the team, every organization linked to football, its charities, and even several sports talk shows were all on my case. My boss, a big team fan, also pressured me. So I found a new job. He realized too late how I'd react and how it would look to everyone else. He tried to back down and keep me, but it was too late. I suspected his future was in trouble, especially after I filed a complaint with corporate HR. It couldn't happen to a more deserving person. Things got so bad that I started documenting every conversation. At first I didn't, but then I did, leading to some very brief talks. The sportscaster who called me the night it all started invited me on his top-rated radio show. I dropped a few bombshells, including snippets from various conversations. One big hit was a line about a team owner who got outraged and threatened to sue me. The sports announcer barely held back laughter. "You can't see him, but my guest is nodding his head. He doesn't even seem impatient. Anything you'd like to say?" I nodded as the microphone turned on and laughed. "What are you going to sue me for? Telling the truth? In this state, it's legal to record conversations without notifying the other person. It's called one-party consent. Besides, I won't use this conversation in any legal matter unless you insist. My attorney says we have grounds to accuse you, the team, and the League of molestation and mental anguish. Do you have anything else to say?" He hung up. The program was picked up by several syndicated shows and briefly made national news. I never heard from them again. Mr. Mark found that the press ignored him unless it was about the divorce. Used to being treated like a hero and the center of attention, this frustrated him greatly. Despite his lawyer's advice to stay quiet, he snapped and did something foolish. He came after me at my house. I immediately installed a state-of-the-art security system, ironically one he had advertised. He was right. It was worth it. One night, there was a knock on the door, and my doorbell camera showed 3 large, unhappy-looking men on my porch. With my kids inside, I pressed the silent alarm button, which alerted the police. They called immediately. Many people set it off by accident. "Sir, this is emergency service. Did you send out the alarm?" "Yes, there are 3 large men on my porch." "3 men?" "Yes, and they don't look happy. I didn't open the door and now they're pounding on it, demanding to be let in. Sir, we have a car 4 minutes away. Do not open the door if you fear for your safety." I thanked them and waited 3.5 minutes before opening the door, keeping the storm door locked. "What can I do for you?" "Mark sent us to reason with you. Drop all legal action against him immediately. And if I don't, then we'll teach you a lesson in cooperation. Gentlemen, you are trespassing. Leave immediately." The largest man sighed. "Looks like this guy needs convincing, boys." The storm door might as well have been made of styrofoam when he ripped it off its hinges. Just as they were about to enter, a voice behind them shouted, "Police! Stop immediately and turn around with your hands up!" The big guy looked ready to fight, but his buddies talked him out of it. Soon they were all handcuffed on the ground. The sergeant took my report and, after reviewing the tapes, charged them with trespassing, which carries a harsher penalty if done with intent to damage. One was a stadium worker, another was a friend of the third who was on the team's practice squad and got expelled. Mark had promised him a spot on the team in exchange for this favor, though he had no authority to do so. The others were promised $1,000 each. It cost Mark more because he had to cover their legal fees. They pleaded guilty and received hefty fines, which Mark had to pay. Mark went to court for orchestrating it, and, despite his status, couldn't avoid consequences. His lawyers reduced the charge to a misdemeanor, resulting in a $5,000 fine and 200 hours of community service. TMZ caught him in an orange vest picking up trash, and the video got 600,000 views in a week. Linda became the most expensive woman he ever pursued. Some fans turned against him, and although it wasn't shown on TV, signs appeared in the stands. As the new season began, it affected his play. One group displayed a banner saying, "Put someone's wife on the goal line. It will make him focus." Stadium security took it down, but the video went viral with 750,000 views in 2 days. Mark went from being a franchise player to getting little playing time, and one sponsor canceled a campaign, effectively ending their partnership. The law of averages caught up with me. One night, 4 guys jumped me out of nowhere. They punched me badly, leaving me with 2 broken fingers, a broken leg, a cracked cheekbone, and bruised ribs. They knew what they were doing. It took just 90 seconds. Luckily, a coworker came out of the office right after me and shouted, scaring them off. 10 minutes later, I was in an ambulance, and an hour later, in a hospital room for observation due to a concussion. My head was splitting, and I kept drifting in and out of consciousness. Once I thought I saw Linda, but then I blacked out. When I woke up, I was alone. It took 7 days before I could return to work. The cops got some surveillance images from nearby businesses, but nothing identifiable. The officer taking my statement advised me, "If you've messed with anyone, tell me. These guys were professionals. They avoided cameras, wore big hats and loose clothing, so we don't have faces or any recognizable features." I told him my story. They questioned him and he laughed, admitting he didn't like me but claiming no involvement. They didn't believe him, but they had no proof. I had to give up my weekends with the kids. I wasn't fit, and I didn't want them to see me bruised. Linda was horrified, but agreed, and even offered to help. I declined politely. The counseling sessions dragged on, becoming a repetitive cycle for 4 sessions. By the 5th session, the therapist asked us not to interrupt her as she spoke. "We've hit a dead end, and honestly, I don't think we'll move past it. Linda, you won't admit that what you did was wrong by conventional standards, nor that it should affect your marriage. You left your husband in the middle of a club to spend the night with another man, unannounced, and used your friends to prevent him from stopping you. If he had done that to you, leaving you in a public place surrounded by complicit friends, would you have been sympathetic? Judging by your actions here, I doubt it."
"Hold on, don't speak yet. Think about it while I talk to your husband." She turned to me, looking sad. "You'll never get her back, that's clear. Your communication shows it, I understand. But let me ask you this. Up until she left the club, you loved her. She was faithful and steadfast. She says it was a one-time mistake, she doesn't understand herself. But it was enough to jeopardize her marriage. She swears it's out of her system and won't happen again. Is there anything left in you willing to try again? I'll let your wife speak first. Please don't interrupt. You'll have your say afterward. Agreed?" She nodded to Linda, who took a moment to gather her thoughts. "You've said I lack remorse. I do have remorse. I never thought it would hurt our marriage. Until the divorce, I knew I had hurt you badly and that you'd be angry. But I never thought you'd react the way you did. I'm terribly sorry for hurting you, and I assure you it won't happen again. Especially now that I know the cost of such actions. Even if you don't completely forgive me, come home and let me make things right." She seemed satisfied with her speech and looked at me expectantly. "You can say whatever you want, Linda, but deep down you knew how much it hurt us. You knew I wouldn't just brush it off and say, 'Well, it's just one time and she says she won't do it again.' That's crap. If I did that, you'd lose all respect for me. Maybe you wouldn't actively seek out another opportunity, but if one came up, you'd take it, knowing I'd forgive. I won't allow myself to be in that position again. The blatant disrespect and the destruction of trust in our marriage were too much. Even if you were gone for just 30 minutes, I'd wonder if you were with him or someone else. Let me be clear. We're not staying married. I'm divorcing you. You can drag this out and use every delaying tactic, but eventually the court will get tired of it and it will happen. Please don't delay any longer." I looked at the counselor. "Are we done?" She sighed. "Yes, I will submit my report to the court by Wednesday, stating the marriage is irreversibly broken and recommending they grant the divorce. No, I'm not giving up. Please, darling, think of the children. I am thinking about the children. I think about them every day. I don't have them. Tell me, Linda, if the kids were so important to you, how many times did you think about them while he was with you in his mansion? Was the trip worth it for you? Maybe for the rest of your family who hasn't faced the real world? Not so much. Face it, Linda. You screwed up. Pun intended. See you in court." I think the consequences of her actions eventually caught up with her. By the end, everyone was exhausted. Her lawyer was tired, my lawyer was tired, the judge was exhausted, and even the bailiff looked aged. After the therapist's report, the judge cut off another stalling attempt and declared us divorced. Linda walked out without a word, and my lawyer grinned when I asked, "Now?" He grinned like a rabid mountain lion. "Yes, now." The next day, Mr. Mark was sued for alienation of affection. He didn't have to sign with the Panthers or buy a house in North Carolina. I'm told his outcry was epic. He can't do it, his lawyer sighed. Unfortunately, he can. It's still on the books in North Carolina. Yes, it's an archaic law that should have been repealed, but it hasn't been. My advice is to settle quickly to avoid more notoriety. Everyone in Mark's orbit called, his lawyers, charity heads, team officials, even the NFL commissioner, all begging for an out-of-court settlement. The offers kept increasing, and even my lawyer suggested I accept. But I refused. I didn't care about the money. I wanted to drag him through the mud. My lawyer's investigators got the bouncer and team leader to confess they were paid to help. Mark tried to avoid court but had to testify several times. Once,
He tried to excuse himself for a Friday appearance by claiming he had to prepare for a rare Saturday game. The judge, not a football fan, said,
"Take a later flight and be in this courtroom tomorrow."
I think the judge scheduled us late just to annoy him. Mark had charm, and his lawyers tried to stack the jury with women, but my lawyer outsmarted them. They got 7 women, but 3 were over 50 and happily married. 1 was a lesbian, 2 were young and single, and the last was a recently divorced blonde. Of the men, 2 were young and single, and 3 were married and middle-aged. Mark initially denied knowing Linda, but when faced with evidence, he admitted she had been to his house. Then he claimed they didn't have lovemaking, and he was protecting her from her abusive husband. Linda wrote a letter to me trying to explain her thoughts, which we presented in court. No one believed the abusive husband story. The final nail in the coffin was Linda's court appearance. She revealed everything, including that she had slept with him 5 times, not the 3 or 4 she mentioned in the letter. The jury took less than an hour to return with a verdict. The trial included full financial disclosure, revealing he was worth $96 million after 7 years in the NFL. My lawyer nearly fainted when I was awarded $30 million, the highest in the state's history, surpassing the previous record of $8.8 million. The law allowed up to 1/3 of the defendant's assets to be awarded, although cases of this magnitude were rare. Efforts to repeal this law failed in the state legislature. His lawyers initially planned to appeal, but eventually convinced him to settle, dropping the appeal a month later. There was a loophole that if his fortune grew during the appeal and he lost, the amount would be adjusted accordingly. Shortly after the verdict, he received a huge contract payment. The day after my award, my attorney filed 4 more lawsuits from other married and divorced individuals. 2 marriages had ended in divorce, 1 was still shaky, and another couple jumped on board for a settlement. The divorced wives, including Linda, filed separate lawsuits and quickly settled for $4 million each. Despite these settlements, he was left with tens of millions. The saga wasn't over. It turned out he had an affair with a teammate's wife and a one-night stand with another's. When this came to light, several players intentionally messed up during a game, leading to him getting punched 3 times, with the last slap putting him out through concussion protocol. Everyone realized he couldn't continue with the Panthers, so they traded him to Green Bay. He played well, but not spectacularly. The Panthers refused to pay out his contract due to a morals clause, so he got only 20% of what he could have earned. Green Bay gave him a 1-year contract, and when it expired, he moved to Denver for another 1-year, $4 million deal. He played well, but not at his peak, and after his contract ended, he signed a 2-year deal with Cincinnati for $2.5 million, which included strict morals clauses. His play declined, and they didn't renew his contract. By the time it ended, he was 34, injured, and retired to host a radio show with the Bengals for 2 years. After that, he faded into obscurity. Despite everything, he still had about $50 million, a fraction of what he might have had if not for lawsuits and bad publicity. He bought 2 car dealerships in California and was back to his old ways. One spouse took it personally, and now he walks with a pronounced limp. He probably hasn't learned anything. I saw a "Where Are They Now?" feature in a sports magazine showing him at the opening of his 3rd dealership. He had gained weight and shaved his head as he went bald. Despite it all, his past millions would likely still attract women. I considered forwarding the article to Linda. Linda got half of our savings and could keep the house until our youngest turned 18. At that point, she could either buy it or we would sell it and split the profits. She also received child support based on my former salary, and if our kids needed anything extra, they got it. I bought her a new SUV after her car was totaled, ensuring my kids had safe transportation. I sometimes wondered if my multi-million-dollar award bothered her, as she had no access to it. However, Linda wasn't destitute. She received a settlement from her lover and half of my share of an app created by Nanette and Eric from my idea while we were married. The app was popular, especially with phrases like "go to hell" and "don't ever call me again," which sold for $5 each. Linda earned about $30,000 annually for 3 years before the app's popularity waned. I put my share into our kids' college fund, telling them it grew every time someone used those phrases. Due to lawsuits, loss of contracts, and bad publicity, Mark likely lost between $110 and $170 million, making Linda one of the most costly mistakes in history. Dee divorced less than a year after us, and Janie separated from her husband 18 months later. The wives who had already cheated divorced before my divorce was finalized. The rest of the couples stayed together, but I no longer cared and stopped talking to them. 6 years passed, and I occasionally reached for Linda in my sleep, dreaming of our life before the affair. I didn't remarry, feeling shy around women, but I did start dating. I soon realized many women were interested in my money, which made me extremely cautious. Both kids are really into soccer now. My son plays for fun with friends, but my daughter is very serious and talented. Her best friend is slightly better, and I've gotten to know her and her mom through all the sleepovers. Scarlett struggled with confidence due to her psycho ex, who vanished and stopped paying child support. Without telling her, I tracked him down, got him arrested, and the judge ordered him to pay all arrears within 2 years or face jail. This doubled the payments, easing their financial burden. Scarlett didn't know I was behind it. She started smiling more, straightened up, and got new clothes. The change was amazing. Guys began hitting on her, especially after she started wearing tight shorts to games. She grew comfortable with me, and I became her shield. The girls often paired us up, and we began holding hands at events. They frequently stayed over, with the girls sharing a room and Scarlett in the guest room. My money allowed me to buy a nice house on 40 acres with a pond, pasture, and barn. The previous owners loved horses, so we soon filled the place with them. At first, I was apprehensive since I had little experience with horses and found them intimidating. Scarlett, who grew up on a farm, laughed at my fear. After 5 months, I gave in and asked her to find horses for the kids and herself. I would cover all expenses, and she would teach them to ride and care for the horses. I agreed to pay, but refused to shovel manure. There was some grumbling, but Scarlett insisted. Either they take care of their animals or we get rid of them. I don't remember when we started making joint decisions about the kids, but Scarlett naturally took the lead, and I followed. That Christmas, Scarlett bought me a horse, a big pinto with a mischievous look. She finally convinced me to start riding with them, threatening to stop spending time with me if I didn't. This panicked the kids, especially as the girls were entering puberty and confiding all their fears to her. My son clearly missed having a mother figure. During the divorce, he faced many issues, and Scarlett was a soothing presence. I picked up horseback riding and eventually took on the task of managing manure. Scarlett directed us to pile the waste, later using it as compost for her garden. I can't recall when I agreed to a vegetable patch, but one day we bought tools and a cultivator. Scarlett struggled with it, so I took over, much to her frustration. After leveling the plot, she could handle it, but for expansion, I was called back into action. The kids pitched in, knowing their efforts meant they could enjoy the harvest. Scarlett shared the tale of the red hen to teach them about teamwork. After dropping the girls at soccer camp, I asked if she'd consider dating again. Her face reddened, but then she laughed.
I'm seeing someone. He's nice, though sometimes clueless.
Jealousy surged within me, and she noticed, smiling.
Silly, I'm dating you. We spend so much time together, eating out, watching movies, and going on outings with the kids. I don't know why I even keep an apartment. We're practically a family, spending 5 days a week with you. But it's just family activities? Exactly. We've become a family. Your kids already call me Mom when you're not around, and Kelsey plans to take you to school on Father-Daughter Day. It's fortunate she's at a different school now, or it'd be a scheduling nightmare. By then, she was holding my hand. It's a good thing your son went to science camp. I love you, honey, and I've felt this way for a while. I understand your past hurt, but when was the last time you were with another woman? Can't remember, can you? It's time for a change. Decide now. If you want me, turn right toward your house. If not, turn left and take me to my apartment. Your call. As we reached the intersection, I noticed the left turn signal wasn't working. Seems like the left turn signal's busted. Guess we'll go right then. Don't want any accidents, she said, her smile bright. There might be a collision, all right, a verbal one. Kids at camp might hear everything. Let's head home quick, I replied. Just before turning into our driveway, I mentioned the extra bedrooms in our house. Good thing we've got spare rooms. Kelsey can take her pick. She gripped my arm tightly. No need for that. The girls want to share a room for now. Maybe we'll need that extra bedroom someday. Once the garage door closed, we embraced for a moment. When we pulled apart, she held my face and spoke earnestly. I know about your past. I'm not one for clubbing, but when I commit fully. I promise never to repeat the mistakes of the past in any future relationship. You have my word. Is that sufficient? I gazed into those affectionate eyes and grinned. Sufficient. Later, she suggested signing a prenup, but after my outburst, she simply chuckled and dropped the topic. For a period, Linda faced significant challenges. The aftermath of our public fallout and the attention-grabbing alienation of affection lawsuit weighed on her like a persistent stray dog.
She left her previous job, citing the burden of carrying it every day. Financially stable, thanks to her share of Mark's assets, she took nearly a year off before joining a fledgling firm. Investing $1 million into a startup, she secured a 10% stake, which eventually paid off when the company began to grow. Out of curiosity, I delved into their business, recognizing their potential despite being underfunded. Quietly, I invested $5 million in our children's names when they went public, entrusting Linda with voting proxies. Despite our past, she always prioritized our children's well-being. With her significant investment, she gained control, eventually rising to the position of vice president when the company split. Despite her demanding schedule, Linda thrived, and our children often visited, delighting in their younger sibling. Scarlett, 6 years my junior, agreed to have a child as a condition of our marriage. Our son Daniel, named after his grandfather, was almost 2, providing Scarlett occasional respite as our older children adored him. At my urging, Scarlett transitioned to being a full-time mother, a demanding role with our 3 teenagers and toddler to care for. Occasionally, I pondered where I'd be if Linda hadn't betrayed me, particularly during restless nights when Scarlett sought comfort in our physical closeness, unlike Linda, who preferred distance. At our son's graduation, Scarlett's husband, bonding with mine over their son's friendship, emphasized the stark contrast between our relationships. Linda's gaze held a hint of sadness. "Can we have a moment?" "Of course. What's on your mind?" "I owe you something, 12 years overdue, an apology. It took me 4 years in therapy to truly grasp the pain I caused you. I'm sorry, sincerely. Even after counseling, I can't explain why I did it or thought it was acceptable. I was blinded by anger after our divorce, unable to see the gravity of my actions. In my distorted reality, it seemed inconsequential. I had an opportunity with a famous person, and I took it without hesitation. I expected you to be proud." As I gazed at her, she smiled. "Reality didn't hit me until much later. After 2 years of therapy, my counselor prompted me to consider your perspective. Remember our lists of celebrities we'd fantasize about?" Anne Hathaway immediately came to mind, my long-standing crush. I chuckled. "Yeah, she's always been a favorite of mine. Time's been good to her." Then, my therapist asked how I'd feel if the roles were reversed. If you had the chance to be with her, left with her, and returned as if it were trivial. Initially, I laughed it off, believing you'd never do such a thing. But as she made me envision it, I felt a surge of anger. That's when it hit me. I'd done the same to you in reality. So here's my apology. I was wrong. You had every right to leave me. If the situation were reversed, I wouldn't have trusted you again, no matter your assurances. If only I knew then what I know now, I'd have responded differently. I appreciate that, Linda. It brings some comfort. Reflecting on it later, I considered the analogy. Water under the dam doesn't flow back. Rebuilding burned bridges is a challenge. You make do with life's challenges using what you've got. With Linda, I had much, but with Scarlett, I have it all.